this as a veteran myself. A temporary suspension of non-essential services, or a slowdown, or whatever you really want to call it, which is way more accurate than calling it a shutdown, is basically where the OMB, which is an executive branch agency, they have broad authority to determine who is emergency personnel and who is not. So essentially, commanders in the field and the executive branch can essentially exempt almost all of the military, certainly everyone that's employed, certainly almost every single active duty person, if not all of them. And so this theory that veterans won't get paid just isn't true. And if it is actually put in effect, it's because of a discretionary decision by the president himself. So they can't blame this on a shutdown because they're the ones that are making this decision. Now, on top of this, if a shutdown were to go into effect on the 2nd, military people get their pay on the 1st and 15th or the 29th and 14th, depending on the type of bank you have, whether it's a federal military bank or just a commercial bank. If a shutdown were to go into effect on the 2nd, and the last shutdown, I can't remember how long it lasted in the 90s. Does anyone remember 4 or 5 days maybe? Or?
It was longer than that.
Okay. Right, so, but the point is that it would unlikely affect any paychecks. So the military is probably not going to have their paychecks affected, and even if it were, they would get back pay. So essentially what you're looking at is a paid vacation. But the fact is that hardly anyone, if at all, would not be getting their paychecks. Other things like Social Security still get sent out. Medicare and Medicaid still get sent out. The post office still operates because it's on its own funding. It's self-funded anyways. Well, not really, but it is technically self-funded. So this idea that the military is going to be affected and we can't take advantage of our soldiers, that's a myth. This is not true. This is, in my opinion, and I'm taking my hat off and speaking personally from my own point of view here, this is rhinos trying to run from the fight, and they're using the veterans as an excuse. I have also talked to, I've called many banks, specifically banks that deal with the military on home mortgages. I've talked to their mortgage departments. They have plans in place to deal with, if something were to affect anyone in the military, to make sure that they're not paying late fees, to make sure they're not paying fines for missing a payment. And I assume that this would go for car dealerships, because what company wants to be known as the company that's dinging and taking advantage of veterans? That would be a PR nightmare. These are all fictitious claims that are coming from the left and from the rhinos, and it's abhorrent. And on another note, and this is my opinion, not that of Heritage Action, but as a veteran, the last thing that I want to see happen is for Republicans to allow Barack Obama to use me as a hostage to give them an excuse for not doing the right thing. When I signed up, as a veteran, I was in the infantry. I slept in the dirt, I slept in the cold, I slept in the snow, I slept in the rain, I was hungry, I was tired. I made a lot of sacrifices. I had buddies who were killed in action, guys I served with, guys in my unit, I had guys who were maimed pretty significantly. We made a lot of sacrifices. And we want the people to be out there to support the Republicans who are going to fight hard on this, because we are ready to sacrifice again, even if the president takes our paychecks, because this would be his call. This is an OMB decision. If he does it, that's the president's fault, and the leadership of the Republican Party should have the cojones to get up there and say, that's wrong and what you did is wrong, and we're not going to fall for this. We're not going to allow you to take advantage of our military and make them prisoners in this debate.
That's right.
Ken and I just had a minor disconnect here, and I want to make one point. I'm sure everybody understands it. We're not saying that there isn't at least theatrical opposition to Obamacare in the Republican rhinos. We're not saying that. They have voted, I don't know, 40 times now to get rid of Obamacare, because they know this is nothing more than theatrics for your benefit, and nobody else takes it seriously. The only thing we're talking about tonight is defunding Obamacare in the upcoming September 30th continuing resolution. That is what needs to happen if anybody up there is serious about getting rid of Obamacare.
One of the other issues that's been raised
as one of the scare tactics, I think, and I think Wade is right about that. It's the idea that if we go and fight, if the Republicans go in and fight on these spending issues, and it's not just the Obamacare fight, but that's the most recent one, that's the one we're talking about right now, that if we go in and fight, well, all the turmoil will be a backlash against the Republicans, and then we'll just be handing the Speaker's gavel back over to Ms. Pelosi there. And I wanted to address that because there are some people that would be a persuasive argument if true. So let's talk about whether there's any truth to that. There was a recent poll that was done, and the poll that they conducted, it was conducted in 10 different congressional districts, and the congressional districts that they picked were districts that leaned toward the Republican side. They were more Republican than Democrat, but 4 of them were actually currently represented by Democrats, and 6 of them were currently represented by Republicans. So these are the sorts of swing districts that would be of concern if there's a strong public backlash against a public fight with the president that would result in a temporary suspension of government services. And they asked a number of questions, and I've excerpted some of them here. One of the questions, do you think it would be appropriate for Congress to temporarily halt funding for the health care law before the provisions of Obamacare take effect to make sure they do not do more harm than good? That's one of the questions. Another one, in order to let the President Obama agree to at least a timeout on implementing the health care law in its full effects, would you approve or disapprove of a temporary slowdown in non-essential federal government operations, which still left all essential government services running? If a member of Congress voted to continue the full and immediate implementation of the Obama health care plan, would that make you more or less likely to vote to re-elect him or her to Congress? If your member of Congress did everything he or she could to slow down the implementation of the Obama health care plan, including voting to stop its funding, would that make you more or less likely to vote to re-elect him or her to Congress? I think it's a pretty good sample of questions. We would want to know how the public feels about these questions. And so they compiled the answers and they published them, and I put them in chart form here so we can kind of look at them. Look at this. This is the first question that I just read to you. The answer is to whether or not they support slowing it down was almost 70%. Almost 70%. And this was not just a poll of Republicans. This was not just a poll of conservatives. And it was not just a poll of heavily conservative or Republican districts. These were swing districts. 70% of the voters in the polled in those districts believe that they should, that there should be a timeout, essentially. Now this one was very interesting as far as whether or not they would approve or disapprove of a slowdown. But look at here. This is the approved down here. Look at that number. Almost 60% would approve of that. And again, this is not Republicans. This is not conservatives. This is all the voters in those districts being polled. The ones that disapproved were not even quite 30%. These are the people that were so terrified of these 30% that might disapprove.
That's going to add up to 100%. You code it.
No, what happened? You got. I'm sorry, I didn't explain it very well. The approved bar is then broken down into strongly approved and somewhat approved. Oh yeah, which I don't know and don't refuse over here. I don't know 26. But yeah, the disapproved is then broken into somewhat disapproved and strongly disapproved. The ones that strongly disapproved was only 18.3%. But look at the strong approved, over 30% on the ones that approved of that. So with these kind of numbers, my question to Pete Sessions is, what is the basis for this idea that you would somehow face a serious backlash in public opinion if there was a temporary slowdown?
Especially in his district.
Especially in this district, which is a strongly Republican district. He won this by 60% and against his last Democrat. Almost.
Not next time.
What's that?
Not next time.
Well, there might not be a next time.